Say his name and he appears. I believe in TPG. Okay, joking aside, I saw this video pop up on my feed. I was like, hey, that's a controversial take, so let's listen to it. Let's listen to how The Last of Us ruined gaming. And we'll see if I agree, disagree, heavily disagree, or I don't know, find something in the middle. Like, maybe I agree on some points, maybe I disagree on some points, but overall, I think this is a very cringe-ass title, because, wow. A singular game ruined gaming. Pow! This crazy to think the entire industry is now doomed because of The Last of Us. Not because of games like Fortnite or Halo or Call of Duty. No, it was the actual good game that came out that a lot of people like.
You're playing a video game, what are things that you look for when playing it? Is it the graphics, the music, the levels, the story, or perhaps is it just the overall fun you're having while playing a game? Personally, besides good gameplay and good story, what I look for in a game is, am I having fun? And with most games I've played throughout my life, I've always had that feeling.
Okay, first off, you're playing Crash 4 on here. No one has fun playing Crash 4, just for the record. And not the Crash 4... the Activision one, like the Crash 4, I will say Twin Insanity or something like that. That's like, no one has fun playing that. Okay? And already, I could taste the boomer energy coming off this. Listen, it'll probably go into it, but let's just say already I heavily disagree with what is considered fun and what I look for in video games.
Feeling. While yes, there are games where I've not felt that at all whatsoever, but when it comes down to it, most of the time when playing a video game, I usually find myself having fun with a good amount of games.
Oh no, you must be mistaken. This came out 14 years ago.
As time went on and technology has advanced, we've gone from little 8-bit pixels in the 1980s to now the most realistic looking eye candy out there. And while that's awesome that we...
Really? Spider-Man 2 is realistic eye candy? I mean, it looks more like a comic book than it does realistic. That's kind of the charm of it, but okay.
Still got some nice shiny graphics on our games to the point where we're questioning how the heck does Kratos look more real than I do, but as nice as having good...
Okay, that was a cringe-ass joke. We're already in a fucking problems. Cringe-ass jokes, cringe-ass sense of humor, and most importantly, weird takes. But you know, I gotta stop pausing. Let's play.
Good graphics are in games, we need to also have fun gameplay in them as well, because that's what makes the game engaging and also fun, so years from later after that, you want to go back and play it, and not just making it like a movie type experience. So, how is that lovely gameplay in video games nowadays?
It's been 30 minutes and I've done nothing but hold forward!
Say hello to the good old-fashioned trend in video games nowadays, everybody. Holding forward. Want to play a game where a character has a varied moveset and good gameplay and fun levels to go through? Well, who needs all that when you can just hold forward and listen to words? Forget fun gameplay mechanics, but we're holding up to climb, baby. Ah, what is...
You're talking about moving forward while showing a climbing section from God of War 2018 and a slow kind of stealth build in Days Gone. And The Last of Us somehow has something to do with this, except for the fact this is something that's been around since a while. Like, yeah, it got more popular after that point, but at the same time, it's like, that's also done to build up the story, build up the world, build up the characters. You know, also fill out the story a little bit, maybe give a little bit of plot details that people didn't think about. Like, oh, but how are we going to explain this? Well, you could put in a conversation that the characters are having while they're walking to the mission. Red Dead Redemption did it. GTA 4 did it. Every Rockstar game I could think of has done it.
This is so stupid!
And now I know what you're asking. Who is the company that is responsible for this atrocity of gaming? And that is the one and only, the company that's now known for not knowing what to do with itself anymore, and that is Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog got their start in the...
Okay. First off, Naughty Dog knows what they're doing. They're making a new IP, and they're going to work on The Last of Us Part 3. Yay. They know what to do. Second, you're showing Mario gameplay when earlier you showed Crash Bandicoot gameplay. Just big criticism here. If you're gonna show, like, try to coordinate what you're saying with what you're showing, maybe show the first big Naughty Dog game that came out, which, yes, it was Crash Bandicoot, and it was their first game overall. But I guess that's too much effort.
In the late 80s with games like Math Jam and Ski Craze on the Apple II computer. But
Oh, shit. That's right. They actually did do that stuff. I forgot about that. Okay. My bad. Like I said, first big game.
Would be really big up until 1996 when they launched the very first Crash Bandicoot game exclusively on the PlayStation on September the 8th. And this is what Naughty Dog would be doing for quite some time back in the 90s. They'd work on the Crash Bandicoot games for Sony, but unfortunately the successful run of the Crash games from Naughty Dog would end up coming to an end after Crash Team Racing. While Naughty Dog did make the games, they didn't own the Crash franchise. Universal did. And after Crash Team Racing released, Naughty Dog became a first-party developer for Sony. Thus, Universal had no dev team to make the Crash games. And they end up giving Crash to Traveler's Tales for Crash Wrath of Cortex to be the sequel to the other Crash games, and then eventually Crash Bandicoot would be handed over to Activision's Toys for Bob, which would be the ones to bring back Crash into the new realm of gaming and made a fantastic game of Crash 4, even though it didn't do as well as intended because people don't like platformers no more. But back to Naughty Dog, they managed to stay relevant with their new game series under Sony, being the game series called Jak, which is basically just a 3D action game of the sorts, kind of like most of the action games in the PS2 era of games. But Naughty Dog Studio would eventually reach their peak when they then made a new franchise that went on to be one of the most beloved Sony franchises ever. And I'm not talking about Jak, I'm talking about Naughty Dog's next big thing to meet gaming. Alongside other memorable and great franchises from Sony like God of War, Final Fantasy, Little Big Planet, or even back then with Crash Bandicoot.
Whoa. Stop there for a second. Did you say Final Fantasy was a beloved PlayStation IP? This motherfucker don't know what he's talking about, does he? Like, okay, he's got a lot of the general ideas right, but Sony never owned Final Fantasy. They had a partnership with Square. They still kind of do, but even now that seems like it's kind of falling apart. But they never owned Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy was always something like it just happened to come to PlayStation. And ever since the 360 days, a lot of the mainstream Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy 13, 13-2, well, actually, yeah, 13 did come. 13-2, 13, for hell, even like until recently, like Final Fantasy, the MMO came out. Then you had the Final Fantasy 15, and possibly Final Fantasy 16 coming, and possibly the remake trilogy. Like, yeah, Sony's never owned Final Fantasy, so, okay, alright. Not doing great.
Bandicoot and Tomb Raider, a new fantastic franchise came into play in the year 2007, and that was Uncharted.
Now here comes the fun part. As someone who has never played Uncharted, I have to now talk about it. So let me just hit up my friend and see if he can give me some info about.
Launching November 19th, 2007, exclusively for the PlayStation 3, Naughty Dog would launch their brand new game franchise being Uncharted. This franchise truly put Naughty Dog on the map for game development studios. Uncharted was a new type of action-adventure game of adventure exploration with stunning graphics for the time, and would be the birth of what would become one of Sony's most iconic characters, Nathan Drake. Alongside other characters like Ratchet and Clank or Kratos, Nathan Drake eventually would become a classic video game character in the Sony PlayStation market. When Uncharted launched in 2007, it was a commercial success from the start. It would even clock in at selling over 2.6 million copies by 2009, and that was pretty darn impressive for this being the start to a new series. And eventually many other titles were released afterwards. This game series was loved by a lot of gamers and critics. However, while Uncharted did revolutionize gaming with its epic storytelling, graphics, and lovable main protagonist, there are things that Uncharted has done to gaming that started making other game devs want a piece of that Uncharted success pie. One of the key examples is that around 2012, games started focusing on really big cinematic shots, just like the Uncharted games. Specifically in game moments to where you're...
I know you're not saying this. I know you're saying... Dude. That was always a focus on for some games. God of War had a huge emphasis on cinematics. And I wasn't talking about the cutscenes. I was talking about like the action happening on screen. They had a big focus on those. Okay, all right. Yeah. Like I said, we're not off to a great start here. We're really not. Because, like, you're already trying. I see what you're trying to do here. You're trying to sit there and say, well, the game developers started copying Naughty Dog because they wanted to be Naughty Dog. And that's somehow Naughty Dog's fault. Oh, darn. You know, blame them for being successful. I can already see that happen. I already see the I guess you would say, the track he's leading us down. And it's like, dude, Jesus Christ. Are you really going to blame not The Last of Us for how games are now? Because I hate to tell you this, Jack, that ain't the case.
You're climbing. In Uncharted, there's a lot of moments where you're holding forward a lot and watching stuff just happen on the screen. It's not too bad because there's still some good gameplay stuff here wise from these games.
Every game has holding forward, because guess what? Are you go fucking forward, dipshit? That's like saying you blame Mario for every game having jumping. That's like saying you blame Gran Turismo for there being cars in a racing game. Oh, God. Oh, Grog. Please spare me.
It's kind of like Tomb Raider a little bit. While Uncharted did start this unfortunate trend, you'd think that this trend would eventually die.
A bit like Tomb Raider. The development name of the Uncharted 1 literally was Dude Raider. Because we're self-aware, like, oh yeah, we're kind of making the male version of Tomb Raider, aren't we? And then like Uncharted 2 happened and easily surpassed anything Tomb Raider had done to that point.
Out. And it probably would have if Naughty Dog kept only making Uncharted games. But we live in the timeline where Naughty Dog in fact did not only make Uncharted games. In the year 2013,
and thank God,
Naughty Dog would come out with the game that would put Naughty Dog down in video game company history. Launching June 14th, 2013, exclusively for the PlayStation 3, Naughty Dog would release what would be their most successful game to date, the game that would change everything in gaming, and that was The Last of Us. When it launched in 2013, it was an absolute smashing success, and it shows because the game sold 6 million copies nearly within a year of its release. This game was the thing back then. It made just about everyone want to buy a PlayStation 3 at the time, and keep in mind,
actually, the dynamic was shifting before that. Uncharted 2, ironically enough, a game you glanced over, was the real tide shifter. Hell, I would actually argue a game before that was also a big tide shifter. That was Metal Gear Solid 4. Other game that has a lot of cinematics and has a lot of walking, but it existed before The Last of Us. So how did The Last of Us, how did The Last of Us influence Metal Gear Solid 4 when even Uncharted 2 wasn't a thing before Metal Gear Solid? I don't know. I'm kind of getting to argue with myself here, if I'm being honest. But it's like, Christ, this is boring. This feels like I'm getting a history lesson.
this was 2013. The PS3, it was on its way out by this point. The PS4 was just around the corner for that holiday season later that year. But the fact that this single game about two characters, a once father and a child, all alone surviving in a post-apocalyptic world, made everyone want those PS3s back then. And for a good reason. The Last of Us is truly a fantastic experience with an amazing story that is amazingly well written and fantastically done characters that makes you feel for them. That's also backed up by the amazing voice acting from the voice actors. Everyone did a great job here. When playing this and seeing the characters interact and them going through this apocalypse, it makes you actually feel like what's going on is almost real with how good the performance is from the voice actors. And
it wasn't just voice acting though, it was also mocap work. Like the scene you were showing, there actually was a physical person getting kicked. Well, he didn't get kicked, but, you know, the acting of kicking. It wasn't just voice acting. Like that, those were actual performances. So, just clarifying something here. That was actual mocap work done. So that's why it looks so realistic, because it is happening.
the dialogue that is being said, it's like watching actors on a movie or a TV show. And
Yeah.
hey, wouldn't you know, The Last of Us would eventually get a TV show in 2023 on HBO Max. Bottom line is that The Last of Us is an amazing story experience with amazing characters, stunning visuals, and a really well done story. But it feels like we're forgetting something, aren't we? I mean, after all, this is a video game, so how is the gameplay of this, well, said video game?
I mean, I can hit people with a piece of wood, so I mean.
So as previously stated, I think The Last of Us is a fantastic experience with an amazing story and really well done characters that truly make it a fantastic time, but not as a video game. When Naughty Dog released The Last of Us, they really want to deliver on an amazing story with this game and make you feel like you're in a cinematic experience, just like a movie almost. The gameplay, however, the gameplay of The Last of Us is like Naughty Dog's previous games from the Uncharted series. The gameplay style is basically an evolved Uncharted, except more linear in The Last of Us. And what I mean by linear is that there's not much exploration involved, unlike Uncharted. Sure, there's some puzzle-like situations, but other than that, here in The Last of Us, it's just walking. Now, in some instances...
Yes, because that's how you get around in The Last of Us world. There's no cars. Like, there's animals. Well, there are cars, but they're very few and far between. And yeah, it's a linear game because it's a story-driven game. It isn't about going around doing whatever the hell you want. This is a game that very much is about, the story. I would argue the gameplay is an evolution of the cinematics. Because in its nature, it's cinematic too. And listen, I respect the fact you're giving the game praise, but first off, we gotta just address this now. What's fun for you isn't always fun for me. Fun is not one of those things that's universal with everyone. There are people who love, for example, swimming. I love swimming. I think swimming is the best exercise you can get. There are people who don't like swimming. There are people out there who like sushi. There's people out there who don't like sushi. Not everything is universal. Now, when it comes to fun, there are some things that are kind of universally fun, but not for everyone still, because it's like there's still those outliers. For example, football. I like watching football, but I hate playing football. I hate getting hit. For example, something I actually enjoy doing as when I go outside and do something is walking. I actually like to walk, but not everyone likes to walk. Maybe that's actually why I like The Last of Us so much, because I'm doing what the game's doing, but just in real life. And getting the benefits of losing weight. Bad segue joke. I apologize.
Like the opening, it's fine since it's us just starting out, but after that, you slowly start to realize, oh shoot, this is all I'm doing, isn't it? Now, I will say, granted, when it's time to fight infected or clickers, or when there's stealth missions, these are good moments of the game, and actually get me intrigued whenever I'm playing. But once you get done fighting off infected, we're back to holding forward and listening to stuff happen again. Look at this moment right here after you meet Ellie. This goes on and on with you just holding forward, listening to dialogue. Also, gotta love when there's moments when you can't sprint at all during this. Great touch there, game designers. Love it. The point I'm trying to get here is that...
because they're trying to get you to listen to the story that's being told. That's the point. See, I see the problem here. You got a confliction of taste versus what the game's trying to do. The game is trying to draw you into its world, pull you into its world by slowing things down a bit. And listen, I admit this anytime today. That's not for everyone. But for me, I will say this for the rest of my life. Not everything should be made for everyone. Because when something is made for everyone, it's boring. There are so many games that come out that are just boring to play through. I recently finished up my playthrough of Rise of Ronin. And I hated that game at first because it was such a dragged out mess. He might like a game like Rise of Ronin. Great, cool, because at the end of the day, I did end up enjoying the game. But at the same time, that game was too damn long. I didn't care about the characters in Rise of Ronin because it never slowed down. It always moved at the pace I wanted to move at. But the problem with that is when the player's in control of how the game's moving, it can either go very fast or go very slow. I think a game should decide its pace and then make the player either, basically quit or make them endure it. Yeah, like I said, The Last of Us The Last of Us 1 is a slow game, and so is Part 2. But I like that slowdown. I like when the game slows down and lets me breathe. I like hearing about Ellie talk about, her backstory. I like hearing about Joel, kind of closed off to Ellie. Like, what the best thing about my job is? I don't know. I don't have to know what's going on. Like, that's to me, and those get you more invested into these characters in the world. Because you're hearing this and you're just thinking, God, he's kind of a dick to her right now, isn't he? And she's trying just to be friendly. That's what The Last of Us is trying to do. It's trying to get you invested into these characters and into the story. And I think video games, until, I'm going to say it, The Last of Us, really didn't take the time to tell a story. I think a lot of video game stories were very safe, very generic, very one-sided. But The Last of Us changed that because I was like, holy shit, we could do more than just be mindless entertainment. We could actually be a thought-provoking story that could have a ending not where everyone ends happy. But maybe that's why he doesn't like the maybe that's why he has this title. Maybe that's why, because maybe he likes things safe. I mean, he liked God of War 3. Just saying, that's a pretty safe story for the most part.
That The Last of Us is not a video game. It is a movie that you can interact with. This isn't really my particular game style right here. I like it when I have to be engaged in a game where I have to think about what I'm doing in games and not just watching stuff happen that I can interact with. A game where gameplay is at the front seat, where that's the first thing developers think about, and then the story comes later. In The Last of Us, the story is at the very front seat and gameplay is in the back seat. But at the same time, it really kind of just works for this kind of game. While I don't prefer this style of gameplay, it really does work for The Last of Us. And it also seemed to work for Naughty Dog, because The Last of Us is now one of the most iconic video games of the 2010s. Whenever you talk about a game from the PS3 era, what is one of the first few that come to mind?
Last of Us,
there
Mass
you go.
Effect.
I already know what you're thinking. But regardless, The Last of Us was very successful when it released in 2013 on the PS3, and even getting a remaster for the PS4 a year later, and thus allowing more people to have access to this game. But while The Last of Us was very successful and is now loved by many, what was the aftermath of gaming after The Last of Us? Because there was no way that this game came out with all the positive reception it had and all the love for it that it would not have left an impact. So, what was the impact? Well, you know how it usually goes if there is something that's successful for one person. Someone else will try their best to crawl out of the shadows and try to replicate that success. And most of the time, it doesn't end well. After The Last of Us became very successful, slowly as months and years went on afterwards, more and more games started to come out with The Last of Us game style, where you play as a character with the gameplay, combat, and everything else is just like The Last of Us. And thus, it gave birth...
Whoa. Did you seriously show Days Gone footage while saying it's like The Last of Us? First off, if you actually know anything about the kind of this weird feud that goes on between The Last of Us and Days Gone, you know that would kind of be an insult to Days Gone, because that's basically saying they're trying to copy The Last of Us, which is not true at all. Like, yeah, they have some of those similar elements, but that's just because that's how certain developers have picked up on to how to tell a story in a game. But last I checked, Days Gone was a open world sandbox game, not a linear third-person action game or survival game. Last I checked, Days Gone, you could customize a motorcycle, take out hordes, and do a bunch of side quests for. But I'm pretty sure you can't do that stuff in The Last of Us. So already your argument is flawed. And you said months after the game came out? This game came out in 2019. The Last of Us Part 1, the first Last of Us version, came out in 2013. What, that's a good 6 years before this game came out. So, oh right, you got a flawed argument here. And not every game that copies this style, this structure for these missions, is copying The Last of Us. This is just a structure that game developers use to be a have to tell a story in the mission itself.
With the gameplay, combat, and everything else is just like The Last of Us, and thus
Yes, because I remember there being a giant arsenal of weapons and hordes of zombies that you fight in The Last of Us. Oh, no, wait, I don't remember that at all because it doesn't happen.
birth to the atrocious style of games that has started to plague gaming for the past.
You're literally showing a fucking open world game. And I'm guessing this is Forspoken, by the way. A game I'm probably going to end up playing. But how does this... Motherfucker, you are literally lying your ass off here. In Forspoken, if I remember correctly, you could traverse using spells or, like sliding on ice and shit. You are picking the linear path. You're picking the only path, the only way to travel that's like The Last of Us, and that's walking. Which, I'm going to tell you this, and this might be a shocker for you unless you're wheelchair bound. 100% of the human fucking race walks. Unless you're wheelchair bound. So we'll say 98% of the human race walks. Does that mean the human race has been copying The Last of Us the whole time?
Past 10 years now being the over-the-shoulder camera. This style of gaming has just about taken over in games.
It's taken over a specific genre. The third-person action or adventure game series. No shit, it's taken over. It's the third-person game style. It is not the first-person style. It is not the 2D style. It's the third-person style. Christ almighty. No wonder these games look like this. Wanna know why? Because that's the genre they're fucking in, you dumbo. Hello, McFly. Think, McFly, think.
Nearly everywhere now. Now, you could make the argument
3 out of 4 of these games are made by the same company known as Sony. And yes, Sony's copying that style. You want to why? Because it works. It's a way to tell. It's a easier way to tell a story than through an FPS game. Or just yes, I admit The Last of Us DNA isn't a bit of everything Sony does, but that's not a bad thing. You are talking strictly about where this camera is placed, which is stupid because it's a third-person action game, and it's known as a third-person action game. But you're showing Horizon Forbidden West here, and this is an open-world game where you kill robot dinosaurs. The only thing that's similar to The Last of Us is this camera angle, which...
argument saying it's always been there in some games.
Yes, it's always been in their games, for the record. Yeah. This is the most that it has in common with The Last of Us. You see the character, and there's cutscenes.
But not necessarily. Let me explain. Take games like Red Dead Redemption, for example. In that game, the camera is behind John Marston, but not in a way like The Last of Us. You see, in Red Dead Redemption, when you turn around, John will face the screen, and when you hold back on the controller, he'll walk toward you. Now, in The Last of Us, if you hold the controller stick back at you, Joel will just walk backwards. So keep in mind, some games use a style that's like over-the-shoulder style, but it's just like that when walking around as the character. Examples of games that do this are Ghost of Tsushima, The Witcher 3, GTA, Tomb Raider, and of course, the Red Dead games. Those games have a camera style that...
which, by the way, Red Dead came out before... Jesus Christ.
Just happens to be over the shoulder when focusing on the character. And that's the kind of over the shoulder that's good. What I'm not okay with is this kind of over the shoulder. The kind where you just hold forward 24/7. This isn't good game design. It's not fun.
Oh my God.
This doesn't make a good...
Dude, we got universal different tastes here. First off, I'm just going to say this right now. I love Death Stranding. I like Horizon Forbidden West. I like Days Gone. What's wrong with liking these games? To me, what this sounds like is you want things done one specific way and don't change anything. That's what it sounds like.
Game. Sure, there's something going on every now and again, but most of the time, you're just holding forward and listening to stuff happen.
Bitch, that's every fucking video game that exists. This is your key point. You keep saying, oh, you keep holding forward. Yes, because you move forward. My God. Such a universal concept. Now, to pee, you might have to, surprise, remove your lower piece of clothing and pee. My God. It's so, oh my God, it's like, this is bare basic human fucking nature. To move forward, you move forward. And somehow The Last of Us is responsible for games moving forward. Jesus fucking Christ.
Happened. Companies saw the success of The Last of Us and thought, so all we have to do.
Yes, because Hideo fucking Kojima saw The Last of Us and said, yes, I want to copy that. Not, because he had his own fucking vision for the game. Jesus Christ, man. Oh my God. This fucking video, it's actually giving me it's making me sweat from how stupid it is and how I'm getting angry, but I'm trying my best to control it.
Is just hire some really good writers, make dramatic shots that have nothing to do with gameplay whatsoever, and bam, game. As years went on,
You show that as they're emphasizing a certain scene where the fucking BT is getting close to Sam. Story. Motherfucker, that is the story at that point. Sam's trying to get out of the rain so that he doesn't fucking, die. But again, you can't, this is your problem. You're not thinking. You're just thinking, why can't I just shoot this? Why can't I just shoot this? Why can't I just kill it? Because the game's trying to tell a story. And if you don't like what you're seeing, turn it off.
Sony kept putting out games from companies with this sort of style, to the point where a good chunk of first-party PlayStation games from Sony all looked the same, where you're holding forward.
My
It got
God.
to the point where this was so popular in the AAA scene of gaming that even the budget titles were doing it too. I kid you not.
Did you seriously just fucking compare The Last of Us to a Sonic game? Oh my God. I'm just gonna let him play for a bit while I scream in my hand.
Whenever a new game comes out, or when I want to go back and play a game I missed out on, I have to be concerned if it's an over-the-shoulder camera type game. And that's not a fear I should have when I want a game. And one of the biggest key examples of how atrocious this gameplay is that there is a franchise that was never intended for this at all, but now it's forever stuck with it.
Oh, fuck me!
On April 20th, 2018, exclusively for the... Okay, yeah, you get it by this point. Sony and Santa Monica Studios released the new entry and the brand new reboot game for the franchise of PlayStation, being God of War. This
Wasn't a reboot. It's a sequel. It's just not called God of War 4. It's just called God of War. It's a continuation of the God of War 3. Just without being directly involved in the Greek mythology stuff. It's still the same Kratos going through shit with new characters and new mythology. So, already wrong. And I already know where this is going. I already see it coming. I like the older God of War games because they made you feel like a man. They made you feel strong. I hate new God of War because new God of War feels like The Last of Us. Yes, except for the gameplay is completely different. And well, yes, the camera, oh my God, that dreaded camera, it's similar to The Last of Us. That's about the similarities. And I swear to Mother and Jesus above Christ, if this motherfucker gets upset because God of War puts you on a linear path and you go forward, I will fucking pitch a bitch fit. Okay, I probably won't do that, but I will do something to my... I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll probably just sit there, just be baffled. Yes, because The Last of Us was responsible for everything moving forward in video games ever. Ignoring the entire, decades of, video game development before The Last of Us. I guess that's just those games weren't moving forward. It's more they're moving slightly to the left in a forward motion.
This game was the game that brought back the God of War franchise after years of being rotted away since the disappointing prologue game, God of War Ascension, in 2013. When God of War Ascension released back in 2013, this would end up being the last ever Greek God of War game. The reason for this game coming out is still a mystery to this very day. This series already was well wrapped up after 3, and there was already the last PSP game being Ghost of Sparta. So the reason for Ascension is really beyond me. But when this game came out, the game was not received well at all. The poor storytelling, gameplay being massively different from the previous games, bugs, audio issues, and also just the fact this game really felt dull and meh and rushed out the door. We've already had amazing experiences with this franchise, so this one was really tame in comparison. But bottom line is, God of War Ascension was the first God of War game to not be received well, and it really made Santa Monica Studios rethink what they were doing. So in 2014, when Santa Monica started concepting for a brand new God of War title, they were debating on how were they going to do the gameplay. This was something serious for this new title, and even Cory Barlog, even he knew that this was very important, that they must get the gameplay of the game absolutely right. And the reason why is, when it came to the God of War games, something that players love from the series is not only the story and the character Kratos, but the incredible gameplay from this series. This series gameplay and combat of the original trilogy is what made God of War so loved back then. So in making this new one, they had two decisions. They either had to stick with the original gameplay or do something brand new. So in making this new one, they really had to tackle the gameplay and how were they going to do it. They were scared that people were not going to like it because of the feedback of Ascension. So what did they do with this brand new God of War game that was going to bring back the franchise in a new way? Did they bring back the old gameplay and make it refined for new generation consoles? Why can't I ever have anything nice? So with this brand new rebooted God of War game, they did away with the well-known and loved original God of War gameplay style with amazing combat and puzzles. Now Kratos is now on half the screen with that lovely Last of Us over-the-shoulder camera style. Wait a minute. Oh, come on! So with this new God of War game, not only did it come with a new and very interesting take on Kratos' character of him years later, calmed down, now has a new family, but now we're set in Norway with new gameplay. And
not Norway, it's freaking, I want to say Asgard, but no, it's not Asgard, it's actually, the realm actually has a name, but doesn't take place in Norway. Cringe ass joke, factually incorrect. Did I say Midgard? It probably is Midgard, if I'm thinking right.
And
You know what I'm going to say?
now I want to get this out of the way. God of War 2018 isn't a bad game. This game's story is great. It's the gameplay I'm not a fan of. While yes, in
I like
Ragnarok,
it.
they definitely improved upon it by a lot and made it more enjoyable, this still isn't it for me, man. I've talked about the new God of War games versus the old ones before in the past, and if I were you, I'd go check that out just so you can get a better understanding on why I feel this way. But to sum it up, I do not like the new direction gameplay-wise for this series. It doesn't suit a series called God of War. They tried to make it work, and they somewhat deal with the combat and whatnot, but that's not when you don't have to watch for these annoying arrows behind you. They took what already worked for the series and changed it massively. It's like when you take an artist away from a band. That band suddenly loses what it originally had. So thus, it's kind of like what they did here for God of War. They took away what made it so lovable, and now it's completely different. They think they could slap the name God of War and Kratos on a Last of Us sort of style game, and everyone will love it. Now, you could make the argument saying the fixed camera angles have not aged well, and people were tired of quick time events in this gameplay style as a whole. Okay, first of all, how has it not aged well? I can see everything around me.
Because a lot of people don't like that kind of gameplay style where it's more focused on combos instead of actual abilities you're capable of using. Okay, confession time. I am not a fan of the old God of War games. One, I think their story is just not very good. I think Kratos at that point is very unlikable to the point that almost feels like a parody at some point. I also think the gameplay, while good for the time, is also very fucking dated. I don't like how Kratos has all these different types of weapons and like none of them actually feel like they really mean anything. Like they don't, I'm not talking like mean anything to the player because they do mean something to the player because enemy weaknesses and everything, but like they mean anything to the story. When Kratos gets his Blades of Chaos back, which, by the way, he never explains how he got him back. He just got him back because, plot. It's a struggle for him because it's supposed to be actually about him taking his past to protect his future, aka Atreus. Those blades mean something, not just to Kratos, but to the player. They open up new ways for combat. And a bit of a spoiler for God of War Ragnarok, him getting the spear is him embracing past traits while moving on with the future with the spear in general. Basically, taking old tactics he knows, but making a new weapon out of it to kind of have like the perfect bridge. The axe is like the new God of War, the blades of chaos are like the old God of War, and the spear is a perfect medium. Those are 3 weapons, and those are perfect for those games. I think they make absolutely all sense. But like the blades of Hades, for example, what's that mean to Kratos? Nothing. Like I think Kratos' weapons should be an extension of himself. In the case of God of War, because a god should value their weapon. They shouldn't just pick up a weapon and be like, oh, that looked cool, I guess I'll use it. Like, the weapon needs to be an extension of themselves. But if he's just picking up everyone else's weapons or severed heads and sandals in some cases, then it has no meaning. It's just a tool. But a god wouldn't need a tool like that. A god would just be able to do it. This, to me, the newer gameplay style feels more godlike because you're actually really fighting. Instead of just fighting a bunch of, mindless enemies, you're actually fighting, real gods, and you're fighting them in like almost on an even playing field. Instead of them being super overpowered, but you somehow have to overcome it. If you think Kratos kind of feels like an underdog in that case. But that's my thoughts. I like the new God of War stuff. I think it's better than the original stuff. I've always said, hey man, if they want to do a God of War remake, go for it. But they're going to upset people if they don't do the old style. Because I guess nostalgia is just really a hell of a drug. Just because, for record, I'm not saying he's wrong for liking the old God of War games. I can appreciate those games. But I was never a fan of those games to begin with. I think those games haven't aged particularly well. I think there's parts in their story that just are problematic for Kratos as a character. I think there's just parts in the game in general that are problematic. Yo, you really want to tell me you want to go through the fucking tombs in the desert again? That are just painful to get through? Or trying to walk on that, those wood planks with a very fixed camera that really makes it hard to tell if you're about to fall off or, you're okay. Just saying.
And there is not one enemy that's not in my sights. I can see everything that's going on, and even when it's not combat, I can see everything just fine. What do you mean it's not aged well? Also, when exactly were people tired of the QuickTime events? From what I can gather, nobody was really tired of them. Is it because Ascension burned you out of them because, I don't know, they made them pretty mediocre? And I don't know about you, but when God of War 3 hit the scene...
No, because it made it feel lazy. Like, why is that just not a cinematic? Like, why do I have to sit there and press a button when you could just make that a cinematic? People, it's the illusion of gameplay without actually being gameplay. It's fundamentally the same thing. Ironically enough, you were talking about just moving forward. It's the illusion of gameplay without actually being gameplay.
In 2010, it seems like no one could get enough of them back then. So I don't get the gameplay change. And you're talking to somebody who got into the God of War franchise long after the original series wrapped up. And you could say there's the other argument, when you do something so many times, people will eventually get tired of it. Well, you kinda are right. But here's where you're kinda wrong too. You're right to where if you keep doing the exact same thing over and over again, people will eventually get tired of it. But if you keep it interesting every time, people will be engaged. Take 2D Mario games for example. We all love them, but they're all kinda almost the same. They all still have the basic gameplay formula of go left and right.
Not the biggest Mario fan. I always thought Mario was Again, the best word to use is safe. Like, I honestly feel like that's what Mario is. It's safe.
Right, and platform as Mario and get past enemies and get power-ups. But when the new series came around in the 2000s, Nintendo started milking the crap out of them, and people started to get tired of them by New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS. So, when Nintendo heard this by the time New Super Mario Bros. U came out, we now have Mario Wonder, a breath of fresh air for 2D Mario. And it still manages to be the same Mario gameplay, but it's brought back in a brand new way. See what I'm getting at here? I get the argument.
Not really. It's just more of the same, but with different power-ups and a gimmick. That's always been my criticism of the 2D Mario games. They're the same game, but like with a different gimmick attached to it.
Saying that the original God of War gameplay style could get boring over time, but tell me this, which would you rather have here? An original style of game with fun, amazing gameplay and combat with a fantastic story thrown in there as well, with amazing writing, or just a game that looks like another popular game, but with a massively overdone story with a ton of Oscar bait? But still...
Oscar bait? First off, video games kicking out money for Oscar, but I pick option number 2, because they actually have well-developed characters that are interesting, and actually have gameplay that is more aligned with what I like personally. That first option, sounds like it's trying too hard. And really, you think God of War 3 has a great story? Okay. If you like generic anime disguised as, Greek mythology, then yeah, it's totally great. Personally, I think God of War 2018 was a heads above God of War 3 when it comes to the story. Because it actually meant something outside of just, ooh, I want to be an atheist and kill all the gods. Ooh, they hurt me. I gotta go time travel and stop them. Yeah, that's the other thing people kind of forget. Kratos time traveled in order to kill Zeus. So technically, the timeline he goes to isn't his original timeline where he kills Zeus. But hey. That's the other thing too. To me, right there, when you do time travel, I already lose you. You've lost me. Because it's one of those things that's so easy to fuck up, and at the end of the day, it shouldn't be done. Because it's just a lazy way to redo the same story and rectify some of the mistakes you made.
Tries to be a continuation of a game that was already well established and had a decent ending. I'll wait on your answer. So I'll answer your next question. Why does Santa Monica not focus on all the gameplay and whatnot? I'll tell you why. Because in a game where you'd have to spend a lot of time making awesome stuff like this, there wouldn't be enough room for this. The new God of War games ever since 2018 have started taking a page from Naughty Dog's book and decided for the new games in the God of War series is that instead of gameplay being in the front seat throughout development like the previous games, now the story has been moved up to the front seat and gameplay and combat has taken a back seat. And what do you get when you do this? You get yet another first-party PlayStation game with a boring over-the-shoulder camera style that's not much fun to offer besides graphics and story, and that's it. This franchise now has the fan base split. There's one side of people who are so awed by this game's Oscar bait that the only words they can form out the mouth is the words 10 and out of. Then there's the other side that can see right through the Oscar bait and point out the mediocre gameplay, or lack thereof, and point out the fact that this franchise is indeed not in its best spot than what it used to be. Again, I don't hate modern God of War, but from a gameplay perspective, it's not good for a series called God of War that already established amazing gameplay. Whenever you look at the old ones, you think this game is called God of War. Now it's just a reskin of The Last of Us with Kratos. Honestly, if this wasn't called God of War, you'd think this was some other game. These over-the-shoulder camera games keep crawling out the woodwork. Whatever happened to making amazing games with fantastic gameplay and making a great story with it? Something that will be remembered for many years to come. Nowadays, it's either Oscar bait-driven game or a remake/remaster of an existing game that has good gameplay. What happened? It's almost like companies saw that you actually don't have to try and make a fun game anymore. They just saw the success of The Last of Us and started making all kinds of games be just wannabe movies with tons of Oscar bait and pretty shiny graphics and over-the-top acting to get people all teary-eyed, and suddenly game is perfect. Then their game is instantly getting all kinds of easy accolades and awards that has no game aspect whatsoever and
no fucking game aspect. Dude, okay, dude, first off, me and you, we're on different levels here, okay? You know, did you just seriously say there's no game aspect to this? Motherfucker, what the fuck do you think you're doing 90% of the damn time? Oh my God. This is the shit I hate. This is the shit I hate. Because he's trying to be like, oh, well, if you like this, I don't hate it either. Well, basically, it sounded like he hates the game. This is ruined video games. The Last of Us ruined video games. I don't know what to say. I'm not going to get through to you. You're not going to listen to me. And at the end of the fucking day, I feel like I'm beating my head against the fucking wall here. This guy and me have completely different tastes. And that's fine. That's great. If you like old God of War, go like old God of War. If you love The Last of Us, like me, love The Last of Us. But it didn't ruin gaming. What's ruining gaming is fucking unchecked greed that's killed creativity. I admit, yes, The Last of Us has created this kind of like copy culture. You know, these, I guess you would say cinematic games. But you know what's funny? It's only one company doing it. And every game that does it feels like they are adding something different to it. Death Stranding is more of an experience than it is a traditional video game. Horizon Forbidden West added more crafting mechanics and had, you know, more interesting character designs for like animals and shit. You know, the robots, for example. God of War evolved the franchise to having a more personal story and a story about Kratos evolving as a person. Like, dude, at the end of the damn day, if you don't like these type of games, stop fucking buying them then. You should know immediately. Just, how about this? How about you just stop buying Sony games? Because it sounds like to me, you have more of a bone to pick with Sony than you have a bone to pick with The Last of Us.
Of an effort and won't be remembered just easy over the top Oscar bait.
How's it fucking Oscar? Dude, Jesus fucking Christ. It's not fucking Oscar bait. First off, because video games can't get fucking nominated for an Oscar. And second, and probably most important, they're actually good performances.
There. That right there is the problem we have now. Oscar bait. This right here is a problem in a lot of modern gaming when it comes to this. And you know what's to blame for all this Oscar bait, over-the-top acting, and all of this lazy gameplay styles that's coming out in recent games? This right here. This is what you have to point to. Look, I get that it's not entirely The Last of Us' fault. It's mostly company's fault. But ever since The Last of Us launched in 2013, its impact on gaming has not been a good one. Sure, there are still some good games that come out since then that's not like it at all, but ask yourself this. How many games that have come out since The Last of Us have either not looked like this, played like this, or overly done story to the point where it feels like gameplay was an afterthought, but the story came first? I know some people can just say, oh, gaming has evolved to be more cinematic and emotional with a well-driven story. Well,
yes.
Let me ask you this. Why does it have to be like this? Why? And what reason does that make sense? I'll go ahead and give the answer. The answer is no. Gaming has not evolved. If anything, it's devolved. I don't know if you know about this, but gaming has always had good stories with amazing gameplay. I know, crazy to think about, right? There just wasn't no pretty shiny graphics or over-the-top acting done back then.
God,
Lines were delivered perfectly without needing over-the-top emotional moments. Gaming has always had amazing stories with it.
You say that as you show over-the-top emotional moment from your beloved OG God of War days. It's not over-the-top acting, because to me, like, over-the-top acting, it's like, God damn it. I'm going to drag out some memories. It's like that scene from Devil May Cry where he's holding that girl in his arms and he's trying to act, you know, like, oh, I'm so sad. Why could I turn your darkness to light? Stuff like that. That's over-top acting. God of War 2018, The Last of Us, have subtle acting. In fact, if you go back and watch some of the footage, you know, you can see like in the documentaries, Troy Baker, the voice actor and mocap actor for Joel, was over-the-top acting. But the take they used, it was the more subtle one, the more subdued one, the more, I guess you would say, realistic take. Over-the-top acting is bad. Good acting is subtle. God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok have subtle acting. But they do have over-the-top moments when it's time to have over-the-top moments. Like, just, this is a boomer take. He's a boomer. I get it. I get it. Video games aren't like they used to be. And I thank God for that every day. Because if that was the case, we would have dated ass gameplay. We would have graphics that don't fucking, evolve. We would have gameplay that isn't an extension of the cinematics, and story. Story and games would be secondary. I think games should have story first, gameplay second. Because the story and gameplay need to be in sync with each other. But the way the game industry has worked over the years is that gameplay has always been the primary focus. Well, now it's time to find that balance. And the balance starts by story coming first. Because story is important for people like me. I get it. Boomers like him, they don't like it. They don't like their games having stories. They want the story to be too simple. But God of War Ragnarok had a great story. God of War 2018 had a great story. I don't like God of War 3. I don't like God of War 2. I don't like God of War 1. Maybe it really is a boomer thing. Maybe it's because that's an old game he treasures and looks back on fondly. That's why he likes that game. Nostalgia really is fucking makes people blind, dude.
I'll ask you this. Why should a game have to be like a movie to be good now? I'll tell you. Companies are frankly just getting lazy. With how we progress with technology, games are becoming more and more powerful and better looking as time goes on. But at the same time, companies are starting to get lazy, and they're just thinking that all they have to do is make the game look pretty and give over-the-top acting, and there you go, instant success. Name a game that has come out recently that has left an impact on you like before. I'll wait. The reason why is because
The Last of Us Part 2, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2. Let's see here. Let me think a couple more. Top of my head. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was definitely a surprise for me how much I actually enjoyed that game. You guys are going to laugh at me when I say this. Fortnite has definitely made me think differently about how live service games can be done. There's a way to do it right. There's a way to do it wrong. There's the Fortnite way of doing it right. There's a wrong way of doing it, which is the Call of Duty way. But at the same time, leaving an impact on someone, it also isn't universal. Some stories, some gameplay elements resonate more with different people. Personally, story resonates with me more than gameplay. Gameplay's that's the stuff I'm doing in between the story, cinematics. I want to get to the next cinematic because I want to see where the story goes. Or I want to hear the continuation of the story in the gameplay while I do the crazy, over-the-top boss fights. Because the story's the driving factor for me, not the gameplay. The gameplay, to me, is kind of just there. This whole thing's got me a little... I'm being real fucking swing like a pig over here. And, yeah, this is obviously a difference in taste. And I don't think The Last of Us ruined video games. I think what's ruined video games is people who live in the past that won't let games move forward. I love, by the way, this whole time, I want to point this out. He's shown gameplay of, Sonic, Forspoken, Days Gone, Death Stranding, God of War. But what about other games? What about games like Halo Infinite? What about games like Doom Eternal? Games like Animal Crossing, games like Mario, games like Zelda, games like freaking Returnal. What about games like, top of my head I can think of, The Last of Us Part 2? How that put more emphasis on stealth than just walking down a hallway. How they had open areas. Like, it wasn't 100% like, oh my god, you go explore the world, there's a bunch of side missions. It's more like the area you're in was a little bit more open while still leaning you in one direction. Video games have been evolving. They've been evolving since The Last of Us. And it's because these developers take that familiarity of The Last of Us, the game, the cinematics, and put their own twist on it. So, yeah. Gaming has evolved. It's not devolving. It's evolving. Because nothing ever goes backwards. Time only goes forward.
Because games nowadays aren't games half the time. They're cinematic experiences that you can play. And yes, there are some games that still come out that are still good at the core with gameplay, but most games you see are normally just the movie type experiences and are not gameplay focused. Games are meant to be a fun and entertaining experience. That's what makes a video game, well, a video game, not being all cinematic and movie-like. If I wanted something cinematic and high-level acting, I'd go watch a movie or a TV show. I don't want movie-like stuff in games. Now, I know this isn't everywhere in gaming, but most of the time in the AAA scene of gaming, this is almost everywhere.
You're only showing the same games, though. Like, you would have an argument if the rest of the industry was copying it. And yes, there are parts of the industry that are copying the Last of Us formula. A Plague's Tale, for example, is something that comes to the top of my head. But what the Plague's Tale did is they actually put more emphasis on stealth and had the story at the same time. Because you're not a super uber powerful god that could destroy everything. You're a timid teenage girl trying to protect her little brother from a bunch of crazy people that want to use him to essentially end the world. That's taking the something that works with The Last of Us, you know, similar structures in some of those departments, but also putting your own twist on it. I think what the problem I have with your video here is you're taking a surface level thing, a camera, and a certain way that you walk down a hall as like, this is killing gaming. But it's like, dude, gaming has evolved beyond just that stuff. You are only looking at these very specific games saying, this is that. See, they're copying The Last of Us, so that means everyone else is doing it. But that's not the case. There are games that come out that are not like The Last of Us at all. Do I even have to mention a game like Persona 5? Do I even have to mention games like Papers, Please? Do I have to mention a game like Doom Eternal, Animal Crossing, Zelda, Mario, Halo Infinite, Gears of War, State of Decay 2? I almost said 3. Again, Returnal? Concord? Much as that game's kind of a joke. Astrobot? Like, you're only looking at these very specific games and say, that's the Last of Us DNA in there. And that means everyone else is doing it. But that's not how this industry is going. This industry, yes, The Last of Us is still loved, is still praised, and yes, there is some of that Last of Us DNA in other games, but it doesn't make them a copy. Because are you a copy of your father just because you and him share some similar DNA? No. You are just an extension of your father. You are an extension of his lineage. But you're not a copy. The game industry is not getting lazy either. Listen, yes, in some aspects, the game industry is lazy. Yes, I agree. When it comes to originality, yeah, definitely. But you cannot tell me, for example, a scene like this is lazy. You know how much time it takes to put a cutscene like this together? It takes months. That's one cinematic out of hundreds in that game. That's not lazy. That's hard work. And while this game, Days Gone, is not perfect, I admit that time day, I respect the work. I respect the craft. Just because it has similar things like The Last of Us doesn't make it a copy of The Last of Us. Let's finish up these last 2 minutes.
I miss when games were meant to be a fun experience when you play the game, not when you just hold forward and listen to dialogue half the time. You just have the same old copy and pasted style, and everything just feels so unoriginal because it's all like the same. That's what made game franchises so good and unique back then, is that they all stood out from one another. And thankfully, companies like Nintendo and Sega have not fallen into this whatsoever.
God.
How would you feel if Mario or Zelda
Yeah, because Sega doesn't make the same game over and over. Points to the Yakuza series.
falling into the over-the-shoulder camera style? You'd freaking hate it, wouldn't you? And I'm
No, I
so
wouldn't
glad
care.
that Nintendo doesn't do this. But the big boys over at Sony need to get it together. So in conclusion, did The Last of Us ruin all of gaming? Well, It depends on who you talk to, really. Some will say that The Last of Us made gaming better than it's ever been, ever. Then there's some saying that it didn't change a darn thing. Personally, I don't hate The Last of Us, but I think how it impacted gaming with its style of gameplay and the effect it had on developers to make more story-driven games and less gameplay experience games hasn't had the best impact on the gaming landscape. Who knows though? Maybe one day this style will eventually die out. And maybe one day companies will realize maybe we should start focusing on gameplay first and then focus on the story. But until then, let's just hope that game devs continue to make amazing experiences for us in other fields that's truly worthwhile, and maybe one day we'll convince bigger devs on the higher ups to focus on amazing gameplay first in games rather than spend all their time on just trying to get some Oscar bait.
Oh my god.
But you know what's going to happen? We're going to get away from this style. Naughty Dog's going to come up with a new game franchise that's going to have even more minimal gameplay and even harder story than before, and thus everyone's going to try to copy that. Wait a minute, why does that actually sound kind of realistic? Wait a minute, Naughty Dog, no.
Cringe ass joke to add in a cringe ass video. Boomer take. All I can say is at the end of the day, man, I got no ill will towards this guy, so shout out to him, Supercon. But at the same time, heavily disagree. I think video games have been moving forward. I think video games have moved past just being, gameplay focused, and that's what I want. I want a little bit of everything. I guess I'm kind of greedy that way. I want video games to be not just one type of game. I want it to be a multitude of different variety of games and different genres. I want an RPG. I want a rhythm game. I want a third-person action game. I want a first-person shooter. I want a racing game. I want a dating simulator. I want a railroad building empire game. That's gaming. It's not one genre or one game type that rules the industry. Because at the end of the day, the game industry is so much bigger than just one genre. Unless you lived back in the 90s and the platformers dominated everything, because guess what? No one had any originality in their bones either. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? I said the quiet part out loud, so... Until next time, guys, this is That PlayStation Gamer sign out. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that YouTube algorithm BS.